York, and I'll introduce other members of our team as they speak. As many of you know, our law firm has been at the forefront of some of the most important litigation in the United States. We like the tough cases. We thrive in the complicated cases. We've handled over the last 25 years some very big and very important cases. I believe that this one may surpass them all. There are many facets to this. The conduct we will describe today occurred over more than 20 years. There are many people and many entities involved. And we're going to follow this evidence wherever it takes us. We will find the silent accomplices. We will expose the enablers who enabled this conduct behind closed doors. We will pursue this matter no matter who the evidence implicates. These brave victims who have stepped forward deserve nothing less. The biggest secret in the entertainment industry that really wasn't a secret at all has finally been revealed to the world.
I'm glad
The
he
wall
said
of
it
silence
because
has
we
now
know
been
it's not
broken,
a secret.
and victims are coming forward. Our team has had at this point more than 3,285 individuals contact us, with people claiming to have been victimized by Sean Combs. After vetting, we now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases. And you should know, to the extent the clients feel comfortable, we also intend to make these individuals available to the authorities, specifically to the FBI. And you should also know a few of them have already been spoken to by the FBI. Now, before we discuss the nature of the claims and claimants themselves, let me comment on the large volume of calls we have received since our first announcement. Even before the indictment of Sean Combs, we had received a small volume of calls and had screened a handful of cases. After the indictment of Sean Combs and the announcement that we were pursuing these claims, the floodgates opened. People who wouldn't otherwise, for a variety of reasons, are now stepping forward to make their voices heard and to pursue justice. But no, most of these people are scared. They fear backlash in their communities. They fear backlash in their own families. They are afraid of retaliation from the perpetrators and their associates. They are rightly afraid for their own personal safety. I expect that through this process, many powerful people will be exposed. Many dirty secrets will be revealed.
From his
we know what we are potentially up
Tony
against.
Buzbee's own
And as is
Instagram
always the
feed
case in situations
in
like
order
this,
to
when
make sure
celebrities
that
are
it's
involved,
not cut
people can be
commercials or
downright
anything
mean and
else.
nasty.
So Mr.
You would be
Buzbee has
shocked
this
at
up
the
on
length
his own
fans will
Instagram,
go, no
so
matter
it's
the
showing it
evidence,
live
to the
there.
contrary,
That's
to
why you're
defend
seeing
celebrities
the comments
they
on the
love.
side.
I mean, there's a reason for this word fans. They're fanatics. I've personally already been threatened multiple times on social media. And when I agreed to pursue this, I expected as much. This isn't my first rodeo. But victims who step forward to have their voices heard should not be subjected to that kind of conduct. They should not be targeted. I want to say this, and I want to be clear about it. Although we are vetting each call as stringently as we can, I always start with a mindset that I believe victims. I believe victims because I understand the tremendous courage it takes to step forward. So if you're watching this, please hear me. If you're out there,
feel free to post in the comments. I am reading and responding to them live.
There is a great strength in numbers. You can seek redress. You can obtain justice. We can help you, and we will help you. That being said, as stated, we are vetting every call that we receive. We've had to turn away some. For each, we ask for corroboration. For each, we ask for the identity of witnesses. We also have collected pictures, videos, texts, we check venues, we check dates. We want to corroborate that the claims being made have legitimacy and merit. We have on staff now a former detective from the Major Offenders Unit of Houston Police Department who is helping us vet each claim. We're using our common sense. We're being stringent because, as I said, these are not easy cases. They're very tough. The process is hard, and in some cases, the process is very lengthy. These cases are hard to prove. Many times, it's the victim's word against the alleged perpetrator. Each of these victims will no doubt be publicly attacked by the alleged perpetrators, and in some cases, the general public. The feckless and cowardly keyboard warriors love to attack. We know what we're up against. We did not enter this fray blindly.
The threats aren't
I wish it
shocking.
was my last such fray.
Possible
I
intimidation
wish this type
isn't
of
shocking.
behavior
That's
wasn't so
literally why
pervasive.
he doesn't have bond
It
right
is what
now.
it is, so we will press on. As I said, our law firms have been retained by 120 individuals at this point to pursue cases in civil court against Sean
122
Diddy Combs.
victims. Now, this man
As you
has
know, in
gotten
this group,
at least
it is evenly
reportedly
divided
over
between males
10
and
billion
females.
in verdicts.
There are 60
So
males and
his
60
firm
females
does not play
who
games.
have joined us to pursue these claims as plaintiffs. In this group, 62% identify as African American, 30% are white, and the remainder are Hispanic or Asian. The victims are from more than 25 states. The majority are from California, New York, Georgia, and Florida. I want to focus on the ages of these victims. When you talk about the ages of the victims when the conduct occurred, it's shocking. Our youngest victim at the time of the occurrence was 9 years old. We have an individual who was 14 years old. We have one who was 15. 25 of the 120 individuals who are plaintiffs in these cases were minors at the time of the acts complained of. The time frame of the acts complained of is very wide. The conduct at issue spans from the years 1991 all the way till this year, 2024. If you wonder why there are so many alleged victims, that's your answer. We're talking about more than 25 years of this type of conduct. Now, although most
You
of the
are
victims who
welcome,
stepped
critical
forward were
thinker. This
victimized
thing is
after
getting
2015,
crazier and
this has been
crazier
going
by
on
the
for a
second.
very long time. Now, when you think about the fact that some of this conduct occurred 25 years ago, and you wonder why would it take somebody so long to step forward, I want to remind you that many states in the United States have recognized that it's very difficult for a victim to step forward and to make these types of allegations when something very terrible has happened to them. I'll use New York, the state of New York, as an example. The state of New York has specific statutes in place that revive claims that are even claims that would typically be not able to be brought, that revive such claims, and they can be brought even 25 to 30 years later. Because there's a recognition there in New York and California and other states that it's very difficult for a victim to come forward. And I would respectfully suggest the only reason many of these people are coming forward because they see other victims coming forward. And it gives them some comfort that, hey, I won't be the only one. And I expect more victims will come forward. You know, there's an old saying, it says, a lie has great speed, but truth has endurance. The acts complained of in these cases that we're going to file occurred primarily in New York, either Manhattan or the Hamptons, or occurred in California, primarily in Los Angeles, or in Florida, primarily in Miami. Most of these events and incidents occurred at parties, typically after parties, or album release parties, New Year's Eve parties, 4th of July parties, something they call a puppy party, the all-white party, although several of these events occurred at auditions. Many times, especially young people wanting to break into the industry, were coerced into this type of conduct in the promise of being made a star, or in the promise of having Sean Combs listen to their tape, or even let them read.
You hear that?
Sean
Puppy
Combs.
parties. You know that there's
You should
going to be a
know
whole
that
discussion about puppy
some of
parties.
this behavior occurred at well-known venues in New York City. Some of this behavior occurred at private residences of people that we all know. Some of this behavior occurred at hotels that we're all familiar with. You should know that more than 55% of the victims filed reported this conduct to either the authorities, that is the police, or to hospitals. We're in the process of collecting with our team assistants medical records, reports that were made to the authorities, and I've already said that some of the individuals in this group did in fact talk to the FBI. You should know that several of the individuals, and when I say several, I mean many, who did in fact seek medical treatment were drug tested, and drugs were found in their system, weird drugs that you probably never heard of. One in particular that continues to pop up is a drug called xylazine or trank, which based on our research is known as a horse tranquilizer. Now, there's been a lot of reports that we're filing a class action. This is not a class action. Class actions when one or two people file a case
I
on behalf of a group of people.
I do
That's
think
not this.
so, critical
These
thinker.
cases will be
And
individual
that's a great
cases.
question. We're
Each
going to
case
get
will
back
live
to
and die
that
on its own
because
merit.
you are
These
hit the
cases
nail
will
on
be
the head
filed
as it
individually,
relates
one plaintiff
to
against
the
whoever the defendants were
sex
involved
worker
in the
piece.
case.
But we kind of
Each
know
case
that.
may be
And
filed
of
in
course, that'll
one
bring
venue
up
like
the
California, another
question,
case may be
or
filed
not
in New
really the
York.
question, it
One
brings
case may
into the
sue just Sean
conversation of
Combs, but
not
multiple other people. One case
victim
may sue a
blaming
range of people.
potential sex workers.
I would
So we're
expect most
definitely going
those
to
be filed, as I
dig a
said,
little
in New
deeper
York,
into that because that's
Los
always
Angeles.
been there. With
Now, I
the
know
case.
this. Many of you came here thinking or hoping, or perhaps believing that I may start naming names. That day will come, but it won't be today. The day will come when we will name names other than Sean Combs, and there's a lot of names. It's a long list already. And of course, I already know who some of these individuals are, but because of the nature of this case, we're going to make damn sure that we're right before we do that. But the names that we're going to name, assuming that our investigators confirm and corroborate what we've been told, are names that will shock you. These are individual cases. There are indeed other perpetrators involved. They will be revealed when that particular individual case is ready to be filed. They already know who they are. And I'm talking here about not just the cowardly but complicit bystanders. That is, those people that we know watched this behavior occur and did nothing. And I'm talking about the people that participated, encouraged it, egged it on. They know who they are.
And we do know there is accomplice
Call them
liability for
facilitators of
people
foul
who
play.
watched and
Willing
encouraged.
participants in
Remember the
vile
movie
conduct.
The Accused?
As we identify them,
That was
each
based
will
on
be
a real
part of this
case.
case as defendants. These defendants will not only include individuals, but also include corporate entities who ultimately profited off of this culture and behavior. I'm looking at banks, pharmaceutical companies, hotels. We know that many of these individuals were paid cash. We know that many of these individuals involved, whether they were the ones being assaulted and abused, or they're witnessing other people being assaulted and abused and then paid and threatened and told to leave. Typically
He
paid
has
10
given
grand in
so
cash and
much
told to leave,
information. Wow.
and then threatened as they were leaving. So in addition to Sean Combs, you should know the defendants in these cases we're going to file will include anyone, of course, who engaged in the assault or exploitation, anyone who participated in such in any way, anyone who encouraged or facilitated this conduct, anyone who was in the room and watched it happen but made no effort to stop it, any venue or venue owner who was aware of what was going on but failed to stop it, any individual or entity who knew about the conduct and benefited from it but did nothing to report it or stop it, and any individual or entity who covered it up or helped cover it up. These people who know who they are should just come forward now. I would imagine, as we speak here, there are a myriad of people who are very nervous. You can't hide skeletons in the closet forever. I would expect there are many people out there right now who are desperately searching their memories as they delete their text and data. Now, although these are in fact individual cases, there is a common theme, an MO, if you will. Typically, the victim is lured into a situation where he or she is given a drink. Typically, that drink, reported by these victims, is apparently laced with something. Once that drink takes effect, the perpetrators perform all kinds of sexual acts on the victims, many times passing him or her around as other people watch and enjoy the show, and then leave the victim ashamed, confused, injured, and wondering what happened. When the victim reaches out, he or she is told not to say anything. Sometimes there are threats of physical violence or financial repercussions or bodily harm.
I'm going to have to go back and watch this again. This is so.
The claims we intend to bring will include the following.
So trust and believe we're doing this live, but we will do another breakdown later, especially on the stats that he gave.
False imprisonment, compelling prostitution, sexual misconduct, dissemination of video recordings, false imprisonment, sexual abuse of minors. Given the large volume of cases, and given our other docket obligations, and given the fact that we want to be sure when we file these cases that they are fully vetted, I expect we'll start filing these cases against Sean Combs and other perpetrators within the next 30 days. Now, it's rare, sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, this type of activity is pervasive in our society, and it's rare we get a chance where we can really focus on this as a country and really focus on this about how pervasive this is and what we as collectively can do about it. So I thought I'd take this opportunity before I go into some of the individual cases and talk about some of the individual claims being made and so you'll get a sense of what this 120 people group looks like individually. I want to bring forward Carrie Paul. She's a national victim advocate who helps victims who have been victimized by this type of conduct. And she has some important words, and I hope you'll pay close attention. I think it's important that you hear from her.
Hello, I'm Carrie Paul, the National Victim Advocate.
The way that he is laying this out is beautifully done.
Our culture doesn't believe survivors. It blames and questions them. Instead of showing support, many choose to enable abusers. The media runs stories asking why it took so long for survivors to come forward, instead of asking what barriers exist. We also don't equip law enforcement with the ability to handle sexual assault crimes.
Critical, you are absolutely right.
Translates to lack of training. We have officers in the field that don't know what to say to a rape victim, and also an alarming amount of backlog untested rape kits. Prosecutors are focused on what they can prove in a case, and if so, how to do that at time of trial. Advocates and staff are stretched thin with growing caseloads in the criminal justice system. Most people don't know how the criminal justice works in general. There isn't enough staff or resources to adequately explain the entire process to every victim and survivor. Our culture works against victims and survivors every day, and abusers know this. Abusers work themselves into positions of power, building a public image that is trusted and financially large enough to make people look away. Abusers are unfortunately very skilled at power and control, the foundation of abuse. They seek victims who are vulnerable, such as children, their employees, and their intimate partners, all who see a different version than the public does, all who rely on the abuser in some way. And for those that do come forward and aren't believed, face questions like, are you sure it happened that way? Were you drinking? What were you wearing? All of this creates an environment that enables abusers to continue abusing them and future victims. To the survivors that have come forward despite not being believed at some point in time, your courage is like nothing we have seen before. We thank you for coming forward for yourself and all survivors. And lastly, I want all survivors that are watching this to know we believe you and we support you. Thank you.
This presentation shows why this man
From my co-counsel,
gets the
Andrew
verdicts
Barksdale.
that he gets.
We've created
You're watching a
sexual abuse
master
hotline.
do it.
I want him to visit with us.
He's the type of
How
attorney
that works,
that
and the kind of
if an
audience
attorney is in trouble, we call him.
Thank you, Tony. Like Tony said,
In fact, he represented, I want to say it was the governor of Texas, or maybe the mayor of one of the big cities in Texas. Anyway, he was being impeached. This was his lawyer.
So well said. It's very hard to come forward, and given what we've experienced the past 10 days is really unprecedented in my career, at least. We represent thousands of survivors of abuse, and never, ever in a 10-day period have we seen over 3,000 people come forward where we confirmed and decided to investigate and represent 120 people, while we're continuing to work through another 100 plus cases to prove them up, to validate what has happened here, and to hold those that are responsible accountable. And so like Tony said, we've set this up, 1-800-200-7474. I have a team of people standing by literally. If you know that this happened to someone and you have information about it, please contact us. If this happened to you, come forward. There's attorney-client privilege here. What you tell us is in confidence. Yes, we'll have to go out and build your case, but we will protect
They have a
you.
toll-free number set up.
And the other thing that I want to say is the pattern and practice of this, again, it's unprecedented. Over 30 plus years of the same sort of events happening, people thrust into the circle reportedly, and horrible things happening to them as a result. And from talking to these people that have come forward these
And
past 10 days,
FYI, when he says within the next 30 days, they're not BSing. And part of that isn't just because of trying to be down with the big story. Part of it is law driven as well, because as we've talked about previously, especially because a lot of these are going to be filed in New York, probably all of them, the clock is ticking on the look back statute. It was 2 years and 6 months.
It was not.
I forget the date, but the bottom line is when we calculated it the other day, they have that statute, unless it is extended again, right now it is set to expire right after the new year, 2025. I want to say I calculated it to be about January, February. So even with the whole look back statute thing, that's not indefinite. They've got a set amount of time. They've got to file it. Okay, I'll shut up again.
I think it speaks to how important this issue is in the United States and frankly internationally, that we have reputable.
No worries. I'm taking notes on the highlights so we can talk about them once the press conference is over.
Witnesses need to hear, the public needs to hear. Let me introduce to you now Olivia Rivers from the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, and let her visit with you a few moments about these types of cases.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Q Olivia Rivers. I am just served my 6th year as the board chair for the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. I'm also the CEO for the Bridge Over Troubled Waters, which is a local rape crisis center here in the Houston area. So thank you for being here as we address these heinous crimes. Sexual assault is not just a crime of violence against the body. It's an assault on the very essence of human dignity and safety. It shatters lives, it destroys confidence, and all too often, it leaves survivors feeling like they are voiceless, isolated, and vulnerable. The reality for many survivors is that coming forward to report their assault is one of the most difficult and daunting tasks that they will ever have to do. And for some, it may take days, months, or even years to speak up if they ever do. The reasons for this have been mentioned, but include the fear of being disbelieved, being blamed or judged, and of course, retaliation. The trauma of the assault itself being compounded by the trauma of the criminal justice process, where survivors must relive their experience in order to seek justice. And these feelings and fears are further exacerbated when the allegations are against prominent figures in the entertainment industry or Hollywood. Cases involving powerful figures often attract significant media attention, which can deter victims from coming forward due to fear of public exposure or scrutiny. The intense focus on these high-profile cases can make survivors feel that their personal lives are being put under a microscope, causing further emotional distress. These allegations mentioned here today, as reported, reflect deeply troubling claims that deserve thorough investigation, and no individual, regardless of their stature, is above the law or public accountability. Sadly, the statistics paint a very disturbing picture. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. In the US alone, there are approximately 463,000 victims of rape or sexual assault every year, and these numbers barely scratch the surface, as sexual violence remains one of the most underreported crimes. But the numbers that follow tell an even more troubling story. Only about 23% of sexual assaults are reported to law enforcement. Of those, just 5% lead to an arrest, and even fewer, less than 1% of reported cases, ever result in a conviction, which is a devastating gap between the crime and the justice that survivors deserve. I want to briefly focus on our state here in Texas. According to the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, 6.3 million Texans, men and women, will experience some form of violence. That's every 2 minutes someone is sexually assaulted, meaning during the course of this press conference, around 60 individuals will forever be changed by this violence. And those are just a few of the victims. Obviously, this is unacceptable. We cannot allow this cycle of silence and inaction to continue. We have to create an environment where survivors feel empowered to come forward, where they are met with empathy and respect and support, not skepticism and blame. We have to ensure that our legal system is equipped to handle these cases with the seriousness they deserve, and that survivors have access to the resources that they need beyond the legal courtroom. We have to address the root causes of this epidemic: prevention, awareness, and fostering environments where respect, consent, and safety are non-negotiable values. Additionally, support for survivors has to be holistic. They have to have access to counseling, medical services, legal advocacy, and of course, community support, regardless of whether they choose to report or not. To every survivor who has come forward, your bravery is an inspiration. To those who are still grappling with their decision, know that you are not alone and that your voice matters. Your story matters. We see you, we believe you, and we are committed to fighting for a future where sexual violence is no longer tolerated and where justice is not the exception, but the standard. Thank you.
I want to visit with you real quickly before we close here about some specific instances without disclosing the victim's name. You probably know that depending on the age of the victim, you can file these cases, these individual cases, under Jane Doe or John Doe. Each state is different in that respect. Typically, there is a balancing test, like the public's right to know the name of the victim and plaintiff versus the confidentiality and the safety of the plaintiff. So we'll have to struggle with that with each one of these cases. Our intention, of course, is to, like we always do, file these cases under a pseudonym until the court tells us otherwise. But let me share with you a few, just kind of give you a sense of the kind of cases and the kind of instances that people are calling and reporting that we are trying to corroborate, vet. And these are the ones that we've already corroborated, vetted, and collected evidence on. One individual who was 22 years at the time she was assaulted said that the typical MO at one of these parties that have been widely discussed in the press was that when you were handed a drink, and now we know that the drink is laced with something, if you refused to drink it, you were kicked out of the party. Now, let that sink in for a minute. I mean, the admission to this party was that you had to drink the chosen drink that was handed to you. And now we know that in most cases, I would say 90% of the cases, these individuals were drugged with some sort of drug. That was kind of the MO. Another instance, this individual who was 9 years old at the time was taken to an audition in New York City with Bad Boy Records. Other boys were there to audition as well. All of them were trying to land a record deal. All of them were minors. This individual was sexually abused, allegedly by Sean Combs and several other people at the studio in the promise to both his parents and to him himself of getting a record deal. Another instance, another minor, told allegedly by Sean Combs that he would make him a star, but needed to visit with him in private about it, away from his parents. Once they were in a private area, allegedly Mr. Combs made the victim perform oral sex upon him. Another incident, an individual 15 years old at the time, flown to New York City to attend a party, was drugged, and then taken into a private room, allegedly in the presence of Mr. Combs, where this female individual, minor, was raped, and then other individuals took turns raping her. Another individual, 26 at the time of the occurrence, was picked up by, allegedly, by Mr. Combs and several other people in a black SUV from the airport, was given one drink in the SUV, and then literally woke up the next day not knowing what had happened, but with pain and damage to both her vagina and her anus, where she then went to the hospital.
I know 9 years old sounds shocking, guys, but it's not. These things happen sadly every day.
Attended a group dinner, allegedly with Sean Combs in Miami. She wasn't drinking because she was pregnant, but whatever she drank at the table, apparently, at least according to her, was laced with something. She blacked out, and she woke up in the same bed, again, allegedly, with Mr. Combs in his mansion in Miami. Her vagina and her anus were torn and sore. And I could go on. I mean, literally, you're sensing a theme here. It's the same theme, and it all involves some sort of drug. One instance, an individual who was 20 years old at the time was asked to attend, just saw her on the street, asked to attend a party in a hotel. She was flattered, went to the party, was given one drink and doesn't remember anything else. Ultimately, was so messed up, went to the hospital where they found cocaine and this horse tranquilizer in her blood system. I'm going to give you a quote from a very young man who told us over the phone about his experience and all the things that happened to him. He says, allegedly at the hands of Sean Diddy Combs and his friends, in the effort to try to sign a record deal. This was kind of what he was told he would have to do. His quote is, "Had he not been in power, I feel like I could have been something great. I quit the industry. because of what Sean Combs did to me. And that's really what it comes down to. We are pursuing this, asking you to support this effort, to encourage witnesses and victims to come forward and bring your evidence so we can continue to break down this wall of silence and we can continue to have these stories heard. This is the beginning of what I hope to be a national dialogue. This type of sexual assault, sexual abuse, and sexual exploitation should never happen in the United States or anywhere else. This should have never been allowed to go on for so long. This conduct has created a mass of individuals who are injured, scared, and scarred. If you're one of those individuals, we ask you to reach out. If not to us, to someone you trust. If you're someone who witnessed any of these events,
This attorney
we ask you
isn't
to
like
reach
that
out.
dude who
Remain
filed the
confidential.
weird case a year ago,
With that,
or
I'll take a
who
few
filed
questions, not
those
many, maybe
TI
two.
and Tiny
If
cases.
you have
This
questions,
guy is the
please
real
try to answer.
deal. And money is not an issue for him. He has billions in verdicts. I mean, obviously for his clients, but since your attorney gets 33%, this man is not poor.
I don't know what the feds are aware of, okay, but I do know it's 25 out of this 120. I will say this to that point. We welcome the FBI or any authority who wants to come to us, and we're going to make that available to these victims because I think that's important. My suspicion is, based on talking with these folks, is that the FBI is just not aware of these people. The FBI has talked to some of these folks, and I'm going to try to encourage.
Buzbee is
to,
the
in fact,
attorney
talk to
filing
FBI,
the
because
suit.
I think they have some very important things to say.
Critical thinker, it's around that time. I believe one of the things I read said March 2025, but either way, March, February
All
2025.
seeking either
But that
TV,
specifically relates
some
to
sort of
New
music
York
career.
City.
They
So it's going to be
promise
interesting to see how they
you know,
file this. Gloria
you'll stop
Allred's case
instead
was
of
filed
basically
in New
things
York
such
City,
that
and
they
the
don't have to
allegation was that that woman's situation
All right, guys.
happened
Thank
in
you
New
very much for
York.
your
It
attention.
wasn't all
I'll leave
over
it
the
there.
place.
Thank you.
Okay, so there
Any
is
file here?
a
There's
lot
complaints
going
here,
on
and I
here,
just
a
filed
lot to
one.
process. Okay, so I'm going to mute him and then we'll give me 1 second. Plus, it's on his Instagram anyway. So let me just get that off. Stop the share. Okay, so there is a lot to digest here, folks. A whole lot. And it's messy. It is absolutely messy. So we are again talking about the Sean Diddy Combs suit. So I'm going to give some of the stats, and then I'm going to go back to one of the pertinent parts in the very beginning. If his Instagram allows me to do that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen just in case it doesn't, while I play with that behind the scenes. Now, some of the important stats that he gave, and as I said, I am definitely going to go and watch this again so that I could really pull the meat and potatoes out of this, because again, since we watched it live directly from his Instagram, so this all just happened. I gave it to you as it was coming. So he had a live video. It ended. So let's see if it'll let me pull it back up. I'm sure he'll save it to his reels because this is a big deal. Yeah, it looks like he did. So he's got a whole bunch on his page. This man he's got a lot of followers, and with good reason. I mean, he is that dude. But anyway, we're not going to worry about that right now. So let me just go back and look at his stats, and then the stats that he gave, because I was writing them down. So right now, He says that they have 120 victims. So that is 120 victims with allegations, cases that of the many that have come to them, and we'll talk about that in a second, of the many that have come to them that they have actually vetted and are ready to move forward with, of course, continuing to investigate and pull the cases together. So that's 120. However, he said that they have received over 1,000 calls. They have, of course, not followed through with a bunch of them because, again, they're vetting these things carefully. This is a firm that has a reputation. These are not people just throwing things against a wall to see what sticks, like some of these folks around the country that you saw with the T.I. and Tiny situation, or even the person that did one of the Diddy cases, that attorney. In fact, even though we know that there was probably some truth to it because of the things that, what's the guy's name? I think Lil Rod, that he alleged have definitely tracked with other people's allegations. Still kind of side-eyed the particular person he had representing him. That is not what we have here. This is someone who, is the civil equivalent of what those of us who are old heads back in the day would look at, a Shapiro or any of those, or even a Cochran. He sued the LA Police Department and whatever. That's why they hated him so much by the time the OJ situation came around. So this is a serious matter, and I'm sorry if you hear blowing in the background. I meant to say something about that earlier. I am not at my normal studio. I'm actually traveling, but this was way too big for us not to go live and talk about in real time. So you won't hear that when I go live again later, but excuse the issue. I guess I should have put my headphones on. That probably would have helped. I'm going to do that right now. Hopefully that doesn't mess us up. Okay, now back to the victims. He did say that there are 100 additional cases that they are currently vetting. So that tells me that is 100 that they feel a little bit more comfortable about, that they are potentially moving ahead with. I am plugging in my headphones. I hope that does not mess anything up. I do think that it sounds a little bit better, so that's a good thing. Okay, so 62% African American, 30% white, and the remainder Hispanic and other. I need to go look back at that because I'm not sure if I got the Hispanic and the white mixed up, because again, they were going so fast and we are doing this in real time. So that's the stats. 25 were minors as young as 9. He specifically spoke about the 9-year-old. I had a feeling that once he started to detail that came in the form of an audition. That is not shocking. For those of you who are in the comments, Lovell, I see you're still in the comments. Please give me a thumbs up or something if the sound quality is okay, since I've changed to headphones. Okay, so there was allegedly a 9-year-old, 15-year-olds, and then other minors. The time frame is 1991 to 2023, which at least for the New York cases are not going to matter as much. Thank you, Slovel. For the New York cases is not going to matter as much because of the Gender Motivated Violence Act, which I'll come back to in a second, because that is going to probably going to impact the men in this case in a negative way. The parties. Okay. Oh, so the event. I was like the parties. Okay. The events or the circumstances. So most of the events he talked about parties, as in the after parties, the all white parties, the album release parties, puppy parties. We definitely got to talk about puppy parties and auditions. Now, for the next few days, just like the word was freak off, freak off, freak off, and we're tired of hearing about that, that everybody is going to be talking about what the hell is a puppy party. Now, for reasons I will not get into on this podcast, I I actually do know what puppy parties are. And actually, so that you all won't freak out, it, part of it, I've been a criminal defense attorney for, at this point, half of my life. But also outside of that, not because I've been to one, I also know what puppy parties are. Thank you as well, critical thinker. So we're not going to get into that. That I will probably do in a separate podcast episode that I won't worry about being monetized or anything with YouTube. Slovel is saying puffy party. No, we didn't say puffy party as in Puffy party. We said puppy party as in Puppy party. Now, if he said, because I'm going to go back and watch it, if he said puffy as in Puffy Combs party, that's fine. And we will adjust accordingly for that. But if he said puppy party as in Puppy, that is a thing as well. Stop it. I said I'm not going to keep talking about puppy parties. Behave in those comments. Okay. Private residences, including, now this was huge. Private residences, including the residences of prominent people and people that, as he said, will shock you. Let's face it, if it's celebrities, high powered executives, and all the rest of them, and it's not going to be shocking. Now, in fairness, it may shock regular people. It may shock the rank and file, mom and pop, everyday Americans. It may shock my mom. It may shock my sister. It may shock a lot of folks. But as someone who has spent as many years doing criminal defense as I have, it's going to be pretty hard for it to shock me. If it's other celebrities, okay, and he's a celebrity too. Is it other rich people, millionaires, billionaires, business people, people from other countries and all of that? Why the heck would these things be shocking? Even from a fictional standpoint, we've all watched television. We've all seen a million documentaries over the years. We've watched 2020. We've all of those things. We know what happens. And we also know that a lot of this isn't about the fact that these individuals are any more or less excessively horny than you or I. It is about power. It is about the ability to say and feel like I have power over people and I can do these things. Assaultive behavior or this type of debaucherous behavior, yes, while it may have a sexual element, it is never about the sex. It is about the power. The reason why there is a sexual element is because of, now, believe it or not, I'm going to say something that is so simple that hopefully everybody listening will go a collective, well, yeah. It is because in the sexual arena, that is one of the places where you are able to exact the most humiliation. You have people in their barest, most intimate, and I don't mean intimate in a positive way in this instance, but you are at your most vulnerable, and vulnerable in the way that scares people. You can't run, you can't hide, you can't do anything, you can't have weapons, you can't do any of that. This is one of the most vulnerable ways for someone to be of any age. I don't care how bold and strong and whatever anybody thinks that they are, male or female. if you want to get someone at their if you want to get someone at their potentially most vulnerable, most likely to fall prey to any type of humiliation, and most likely to feel most likely to be blackmailed, for want of a better way of putting it, you then you do something to them of a sexual nature. That is the way to break down anyone, from the biggest of the big to the smallest of the small. And I think that if we step outside of viewing this stuff from the salacious way of viewing it like just that purely sexual, you know, 50 shades of gray times 1 million to the point of scary, or any of that, and look at it beyond that, and just the base level humanity and what it does to someone's humanity, to break them down to just their sex, being naked, having things done to you, then you will understand that this is not about that. Yes, they may get their rocks off in between, sure, but it is far bigger than that, far more important. So, as we go through this, especially as the victims mount and you hear about the level of debauchery and craziness, while you are listening to it, I hope that you hearken back and of course encourage your friends to, and like and share this podcast, and this YouTube, to remind them that Just Johnda said, expand your minds and go to the base level of how you would feel if you were just broken down to that level, no matter what was going on, whether it's in the context of a party, 50 million people there, celebrities, all of that. This is about the putting someone at their most vulnerable so you can assert power over them. And that is unfortunately what people corrupted by their own power, which he and others allegedly clearly are, will do. So that is that part. Now, let's see, what else did he say? Because I was trying to furiously take notes. So that's the private residences, people that may or may not shock us. We know they won't. 55. This part is now. As I often say, there are very few things that shock me. This one, it did kind of shock me, and I'll say kind of and kind of not. It shocked me in the sense of the audacity of the people involved. And now we know that this is where other things are going to get opened up. He's already said that they're cooperating in any way with the FBI. And we know that the FBI and Homeland Security and all of that is already involved. We've seen the raids, we've seen the indictments. We talked about that. This is where that case can get exponentially bigger. And that is when he talks about the fact that there were police reports and hospital reports, because that speaks to a conspiracy on a whole different level when you talk about who has whom in their pockets. When it comes to medical reports, if there's a medical report regarding, especially involving a child, where's the mandatory reporting going on in all of this? Where is the mandatory reporting if someone shows up that potentially looks like a victim of domestic violence? But again, especially if we're talking about minors. Now, again, we don't know who filed reports and who didn't, but let's just look at this. Let's just play by the numbers. We're talking about 120 people so far, and 55% of them had some report in some way. So let's just play with some numbers here. 120 people. I'm no mathematician, and I'm not about to whip out the calculator in the middle of this. 120 people, 55%. So we know that's over 50 people, right? Can we all agree that's about 50, maybe 55 to 60 people? Okay. So you got around 60-ish people. Even if we're going to be generous and say that most of those reports were medical reports, which means that, you know, if it wasn't a minor, there would have been no obligation for the doctor to do anything other than treat the person. If they leave, that's it. And only maybe 10 or 15 of them were police reports. Why were those 10 or 15 police reports wiped out? I don't give a damn if it was one. Where are they? But what's even more important, because obviously we can't go back in time. There's a little bit that the statute is allowing us to go back in time, but I mean, we can't go back in time in terms of saying, well, who should have done this and who should have done that. We already know. People didn't do things for a variety of reasons. And we know in the Cassie case, especially in terms of, she talked about this in depth her lawyer spoke for her in depth in their case. If you all remember from the Cassie case, and if you don't, I did a full episode on that. So let me know here in the comments if you want me to put that episode link in the description box for this episode so that you can refer back to that case to refresh yourself of some of these things. At any rate, in the Cassie case, she talked about a couple of instances, but one in particular, very detailed about her going to get what I believe is like a CAT scan or MRI. But the bottom line is she had to get her head examined for being knocked around so much and for all the drugs that she was being given. And literally those records, of course, according to her filing, were provided to him. I don't give a damn if he is the person who is standing there with the checkbook or the insurance is in their name, or even if they're married, your medicals go to you. There are HIPAA laws. And we're not just talking about her medicals in terms of them giving him her diagnosis, but her actual report and test results. So that tells you the type of thing that was going on. We also know that the hotel footage was purchased, but of course, he didn't realize that somebody kept a copy. So there's all of that. And again, we know every day there are people on the take, whether it's medical personnel, whether it's police officers. So that was a bombshell in the sense that it opened up that other can of worms that I am sure Damian Williams in his office, that's the United States Attorney of New York, and his office are loving every bit of, because they're getting free investigators at this point, based on what Buzbee and his team is doing. Okay, let me look in the comments on Critical Thinker. Oh, that's a good one. Let me show that. So Critical Thinker said, unfortunately, we do still have to tell our daughters not to be in certain environments. They'll unknowingly become survivors. And I love that you call them survivors instead of victims, because absolutely, they are survivors. You make it out, you're a survivor, period. We'll work on all getting you help and everything like that, but you're a survivor. And our sons too. Thank you, Critical Thinkers. So true. And I am a boy mom and a girl mom, so I am conscious of both of those things. So often, according to those cold case shows, police agencies seem to bury the info. This is also by Critical Thinker. See, your name came from somewhere, because you are firing on all cylinders. Absolutely. I mean, money is what it is. Whether people cover things up to cover their own ass or save their own careers, as we've seen people do because they screw up along the way in the investigation. I don't think that there was any investigation in these. So this isn't somebody trying to cover their ass. This is whether or not someone straight up covered evidence because they believed that something could have gone wrong. Now, you were dead wrong in there, Critical Thinker, saying they brought their own pull-ups. Okay. So now It looks like there are men that they have spoken to. So, and I think that's great because we do not want to leave the men out. If there are male victims, and it doesn't even have to do with Diddy, if there's male victims of anything, they need to come forward. Slovel, fathers are and responsible men need to have the confidence from their community to protect and teach our children how to protect themselves. Absolutely. I mean, and the reality of it is, it, in any community, we need to literally be a community. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you said fathers and responsible men. I agree with you. Moms and other women too. I see women not even speaking up as it relates to things with other women, or maybe even siding with men in certain environments because, I don't know, nerves or whatever. And then of course we also, with changing generations and demographics, people are not the way they used to be about other folks, about other folks stepping up and saying, look, blah 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 blah, when they see a child potentially going into a situation or doing something that could cause them harm. You know, you may have the right intentions, but a parent uh is stepping up and going, don't say anything to my child or whatever. Okay, well, you know, I tried to stop them from running in front of a moving car, but if you told me not to yell at them, in this case I stopped them from running in front of a moving Diddy in his baby oil. But so, not Pookie and Ray Ray either. I agree. Although, let's face it, Pookie and Ray Ray have their place in our community as well, because it sounds like there were a few situations where some of these young women or young men needed a Pookie and Ray Ray on speed dial to roll up and whoop somebody's ass. So, critical thinker, let's post this. It's so scary and disgusting. I injected levity sugar to help the medicine go down. Absolutely. I mean, we have to, right? We have to literally go back to Mary Poppins. Yes, I knew where you got that from. It takes a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. Okay, you all don't want to hear me go into Broadway. So anyway, all right. So let's talk about, because I'm not going to stay on much longer with you, because again, we're going to definitely do another another episode on this because there was so much to digest. I just want to make sure I hit all of my notes. So he said that I mentioned, he said they received over 1,000 calls, confirmed 120. They expect within the next 30 days. We know certainly New York has, if the cases happen in New York, that will be helpful. So let's talk about that, because that leads me right into the New York Gender Motivated Violence Act. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube and looking at the comments, then you will see that I actually posted the language for the Gender Motivated Violence Act in the comments. So this is why I'm going to post this. That's such a great comment, critical thinker. In addition to failing us on the 3 R's, the village no longer teaches us how to treat one another. Girl, I'm going to leave that up there. That might have to stay up there. Okay, so why is the New York Gender Motivated Violence Act important? Okay, so just a bit of history. And this, we all, for those of us, again, who have been following this case, especially before and certainly that critical day when the Cassie Ventura case was filed back in November 2023, we all became acquainted with for want of a better way of putting it, we called it a look back statute in New York. So in 2020, not 2022, 2019, I believe it was 2019, 2020. The governor of New York passed landmark legislation, and there was actually a couple of other states that did it in varying degrees and for their own specific time period. California was one of them. But notice these are states that are blue states. I'm not even being political, I'm just being real. They passed look back statutes, which essentially were to address the growing outcry, especially in light of the Me Too movement, of what we essentially already know, which is that people that gender-based crimes, or not even just gender-based, because we'll get into that in terms of the specific New York statute, but certainly crimes of violence and sex, which often come out of intimate partner relationships or work relationships, etc., but most definitely sex crimes, often lead to victims not coming forward. And then before you know it, even if it is, especially if you're not in a state, which most people are not, where there is no statute of limitations on rape, you find yourself in a situation where you finally either acknowledge it, get the courage, or even remember, because you have people block it out for several weeks, all of those things, that there would be it would be nice for I hate to make it too light, but for one of a better way of putting it, it would be nice to allow for a short period of time the ability for individuals to potentially, you can't change anything in terms of the criminal process because people's liberty is at stake, and that's a constitutional issue. But if you can't get them in the criminal process, you can certainly do it with a civil process. So with a civil process, to then open up a short period of time that would allow, for want of a better way of putting it, a look back. And that look back, I'm going to try and plug in my computer, folks, so bear with me and let's hope that I don't get knocked off. It would allow for a look back, which essentially says that if the statute of limitations on your case had otherwise run, particularly as it relates to criminal prosecution. And I mean, obviously, if the criminal prosecution had statute of limitations that run the civil, it probably run as well. That you had 2 years from the date of that statute to bring those cases. Hence, why we called it a look back statute. So Cassie's was filed. It did not have to be right there just in New York City. Cassie's was filed based on that particular statute. I think they may have used the gender motivated violence one as well, but it was filed based on that statute. She was within the 2 years. In fact, the 2 years expired literally the very next day. So I do believe there's not much that Diddy has said that I believe, but I do believe that she and her attorneys, although he tried to call it blackmail, those of us who actually do this for a living call it what it is, negotiation. She and her attorneys did reach out to him, and they did attempt to work this out. And again, based on the attorney that she has, in fact, I know someone else who is being very successfully represented by that attorney. That attorney has also represented Epstein victims. So Cassie didn't just get some old fly by night BS person that's running around, playing little tit for tat games with rappers. No, I 100% believe that her attorney contacted him and said, look, this is what we are proposing to do as it relates to this. My client, especially given this statute, can sue your ass. This is the evidence. You know that these things happen. You know that they exist. And if you do not meet our demand, we're going to sue you. This is literally no different than what I do in personal injury cases. By the way, I do personal injury, so feel free to reach out to me. So not just criminal defense. My firm also specializes in personal injury, of course, because I've done criminal and family for almost 20 years. Then I am their specialist in those areas. But it is literally no different than a demand letter that I would send to an insurance company for an accident case. My client wants up to the policy limits, and this is the amount of time you have to respond. We may or may not negotiate depending on the situation, and they either come correct or they don't, and we either file the case or we don't. And that is what happened with Cassie. And we know that at least but that part is certainly believable and plausible. And we also know that her attorneys clearly gave him a firm deadline because that statute expired the next day. So why is that important as it relates to the New York Gender-Based Violence Act? Because the New York Gender-Based Violence Act, thankfully, or Gender Motivated Violence Act, picks up where that one leaves off, because that one expired. However, the city of New York, in response to the millions of acts of violence against individuals by people of the opposite gender every year, the fact that 3 out of 4 women will have been the victim, or rather, I like the way Critical Thinker says, the survivor of some type of violent act over their lifetime, that they did their own version of the look back statute. So that's what you heard earlier during the press conference, me kind of talking back and forth with someone in the comments about in terms of the time. So because that one was just passed in 2022, then of course the 2 years plus 6 months puts you in or about February, March of 2025. So that is the act that TG, as we know the last time, I won't use her name. That is the act that TG, by her attorney, Gloria Allred, filed under last week. There were several other causes of action, but as it relates to being what's going to get you in court, they filed under that one, and because of the location, that put them firmly there. So I think a lot of the investigation and a lot of the work that's going to be done with Buzbee, but my money's on them in terms of coming up with a way to do it, is how to loop in these individuals in other places, because it's not just about acts that take place in New York. And I honestly think part of it is going to be, which is brilliant, and that is why he absolutely made sure to talk about the collusion, if you will, between all of these other entities involved, whether it was hotels, whether it was corporations, whether it was payoffs, because if you loop in all of those other entities, especially as it relates to bad boy corporation, bad boy clothing, Combs this, Combs Enterprises, Combs International, there's a whole bunch. A lot of those businesses, especially Bad Boy, have their principal place of business in New York. And of course, we know that Sean Combs has homes both in New York and I believe New York. I know that he has homes in California and in Florida. I actually don't know if he has an actual home in New York City, but he definitely has a principal place of business in New York City. And of course, if that's included in the suit, that gets you where you need to be. So even the acts that happened in other places, because you have looped in these entities with their principal place of business in New York, that is going to help you pull in those those other suits where people were done dirty, so to speak, in California and in Florida, because that was another stat that he used. He said that, and someone correct me if I'm wrong for the purposes of this podcast. Obviously, I'll have it all right in the next one. That these acts took place in multiple states. I thought that he said as many as 25, but I could be mixing that up with the 25 minors. So don't quote me on the 25 states, but multiple states. However, he did point out some specific places in New York. He mentioned New York City, as in Manhattan and the Hamptons. That makes sense because we do know, and this is where the parties come into play, particularly the white parties. So folks are going to be looking real crazy because people were real pressed about these parties. That the principal, that in New York, you had Manhattan and the Hamptons. Now, I don't know if he still owns the home in the Hamptons or if he ever owned it and just rented it. But we do know for a fact that there was a whole thing with Diddy in the Hamptons. In fact, when he first started having those white parties, because we all remember it was a huge thing. This Diddy started throwing these parties in the Hamptons, and they were white parties, and he'd bring all these, the glitz and the glam, and everybody's like, wow, I wish I could be invited to one of, that was the thing, the white parties, Diddy's white parties, and everybody was having white parties. We know it's because of Diddy's white parties. And those were definitely in the Hamptons. Obviously, he has a fabulous home in Miami. So I believe Star Island. And so, of course, he does events there and at his LA home as well. But those white parties was all about the Hamptons when that whole thing happened. Florida, they mentioned Miami, makes sense. He has a home there. And of course, people hang out in Miami. Miami is a playground for everybody, including celebrities. And then LA, for obvious reasons. Hollywood, he has a home there, as well as other celebrities, corporate people. Because again, this is not, and remember, when everybody hops on this celebrity stuff and they want to start naming all these names, which I'm not going to do, and they start wanting to name all these names, this is not just about celebrities in the traditional sense. When you are a business person, the celebrities of your world are not the celebrities of the rest of our world. When you are a person who's a millionaire and you're rolling with folks that are multi-hundred millionaires and billionaires, that's the real celebrity. The folks with the money, the folks that are flying back and forth on their own private planes back and forth to Dubai, to their own islands and estates that take up entire equivalents of New York City blocks. That's the big dogs. And that is why, for all these people who think that he's gonna start singing like a bird about whatever it is you claim he's or think he has to sing like a bird about, he ain't saying squat. Because the type of individuals who were at these parties were not just the people that you see. The real deal is the people that were not in those pictures. It is not the people in the pictures that we have seen in People magazine and all of those things. Those aren't the people that are the real folks that were in and out of this mess, and the names that may or may not ultimately be named. And Buzbee knows that. That's why he's not naming their names. These are not your run-of-the-mill celebrities. These are not even your run-of-the-mill celebrities that you think are the big folks. And I'm not saying any of these folks are involved in it, but I'm just saying, like, people you think are like your mega celebrities, like your Jay-Z's and your Kanye's and your Ushers and those kind of folks. And again, disclaimer, I'm not saying those names to say they're a part of this case. I'm using them as an example to illustrate the type of folks that we think are huge, the Taylor Swifts, all of those folks. No, Those are not the people who are important here. Those are not the people that mega lawyers who have lawyers of their own are afraid to say or concerned to say their names until they've got all their ducks in a row. Nobody cares about those people. People toss their names and stuff all the time, and then they retract it, and or they file something and they settle or whatever. TMZ, the New York Post, the Daily News, their names get tossed in and out of stuff all the time. You got all the whack jobs on the internet who talk about the stuff, and then you've got your blogs that all speculate and put them in and out of stuff. That's normal. Even in a case that's ugly, it's normal. You know how many times those names have been associated with this stuff? And eventually people will just either, some people will continue to say their names and it just, nothing comes of it, and it'll just go away. You know, it's the people who were not in those photos, the people who were at the parties, but not at the parties, not in the front of the room, that get photographed. The people who are clamoring to be in the photograph so that they can be on the cover of the magazines, or so that they can be in the section of the New York Post that shows who had a party last week. The big money people are not in those pictures. The people who, run the world, have the planes, the people who, like Nino Brown said, there's no poppy fields in Harlem and we're not flying in and out planes. Those people don't pose for pictures. They don't need to. They're too rich to pose for pictures. That is beneath them. Those are the names when he says you will be surprised by the names in the homes and stuff. It's those people. So let's see. Let me make sure I got all. Oh, again, back to the real quick and dirty Gender Motivated Violence Act. If that is one of, then it'll be several things. If that is one of several things that they sue in their theory that they sue under, because obviously that's the easiest. They'll find other causes of action, but that's definitely going to be the easiest because it gets you around the statute of limitations. If that is one of them, it's going to be very interesting to see how they craft that as it relates to male victims. I do absolutely believe that it can be done. Obviously it's a lot easier to use the Gender Motivated Violence Act when you have a male female situation, when you have people of the opposite sex, or even if you have people of the same sex who were in a romantic situation, because you use the statute in the same way. And there's an obvious presumption when either they are individuals of opposite sexes, like if it's a man violating a woman, or even individuals who were in a same-sex relationship violating the women. You just ascribe essentially a gender role for the purposes of the statute to whomever the abused person was versus who the person is that's being abused, because they're still in a relationship that is traditional for relationship purposes, but for the fact that they're the same sex. However, when you have a situation like this, where it is clear that most of the victims are who are part of this are female, and that what is being done to the men, you definitely are more about the whole power and humiliation. It's going to be very interesting. It can absolutely be done, but it's going to be very interesting to see how the argument is crafted and argued to have them fall under it. I definitely think they do, and I look forward to reading it. Critical Thinker says, truly powerful folks are scrubbed from the pics. We only see press shots of the Saudi family, UAE magnates. They are not peacocks. They have beyond large checkbooks, making things go away. I agree with you, Critical. And again, not only scrub from pics, but honestly, you don't even have to scrub people from pics who choose not to be photographed. It's very easy not to be photographed. Contrary to what some celebrities would have you think, it is very easy not to be photographed. You just don't put yourself in places where pictures are being taken. If you're in the back room and everybody knows that what goes on in the back room, nobody's taking pictures, then you don't take pictures. Even if we were not talking about anything as nefarious as sexual assault and we were merely just talking about illegal gambling, because we know people do lots of that at parties as well. I mean, illegal gambling, or I won't even go that far. Let's make it real simple because it's a party. Drug use. That's not going to happen in the area where somebody is snapping photos. Even if it's in the living room, then it's in the corner of the room or it's in another room. So if you don't want to be in photos, you don't have to be. And if you're there for the freak off, you're not going to be in the pictures. It's also interesting that they said a lot of these events, that some of these events continue through this year, which I find to be very interesting because you would think that Combs himself would be more careful. I think that falls more so into the company that you keep, because we know that Stevie J, from, I mean, he was once a good music producer, but now I just think of him as Love and Hip Hop, and I think most people do as well. We know that he was living with him and all of that, but even more so than just looking at it from the Stevie J standpoint, I never forget, there was some stuff reported on the blogs about some drama with some of the Love and Hip Hop chicks fighting outside of the Diddy white party. So that also speaks to the level of people who are attending nowadays, which of course would lend itself to certain types of behavior continuing in an open and notorious manner. I love whenever I have an opportunity to use that in or out of court. Continuing in an open and notorious manner, which would make it more probable that things that aren't typically photographed or that are typically hidden a little better are not as hidden, because now you're dealing with people who don't have anything to lose. Now you're dealing with people who want to be caught on camera doing something just because of the current state of any publicity is better than no publicity, especially if that gets me on the blogs or anything else. I mean, that's because, of course, we know that is absolutely the world we're living in now. So I am very, this definitely got my juices flowing today. Personally, I was looking forward to seeing what happened with the Eric Adams motion, which I am going to look up as soon as we get off of this live, because I expected that is what I would be going live about today, which is the motion filed by Eric Adams' attorney, and of course finding out what went on in court there. So there is so much happening that this whole I mean, my so you're just playing in our faces series is just it's getting more things added to it. I would like to finish it and move on to the next series. But at any rate, I thank you all for joining me this afternoon. I had not expected to be here. I knew that a press conference was going to be held. I thought that homie was just going to come on and announce some stuff, maybe bloviate a little bit, but he definitely gave us, a lot to talk about. I think when he started hitting us with the stats of his victims, alleged victims, obviously, nothing's been proven, nobody's been found guilty of anything. I think that is going to give a lot of folks a lot to talk about. And I think that there is going to be a ton of scrambling and speculation. And all I'm going to say to that is stay tuned and don't assume anything about who some of these individuals are. Will there be some people where we'll go, yeah, well, that makes sense. Not surprising. Yeah, we saw him hanging with him or her. Okay, could be women. Let's not forget that. We've seen him or her in the mix. We've seen them hanging together, whatever. Not surprising. But will there be some folks that uh that we may be truly like, huh, interesting. Let me go dig a little deeper on that person. There absolutely will be. By the way, real quick, you heard me say this while he was talking, a masterful stroke in terms of how he was laying it out when he was talking about the hotels and Diddy, and he's talking about hotels and corporations and payoffs. And all of that, masterful. And the reason why is because now we are stepping outside of just Sean Combs, because remember, this is at the end of the day the only justice he can get for his clients, because he is a private attorney in a civil matter. So when everybody's like, well, they should be trying to get him locked up and whatever, no, you leave that to the government to do. But in the civil matter, the goal is to get the best and highest award that you can for your clients. And also, he's got hundreds of clients, which means that to get them a good award, he's got to get a lot of money, which means you've got to get at everybody. And that extends beyond Diddy and Diddy's corporations, because if the government's case goes through, they're going to bankrupt him anyway, because he's going to be paying this and that and restitution and fines and all of those things. What they want to do is to make sure that they can get at any possible entity that can add to the judgment. That's extremely important. So that's why you bring in the hotels and all of that, because that adds to your potential judgment. That is masterful. And that is why he and his firm have amassed verdicts that go into the billions, because if they don't know how to do anything else, they clearly know how to find a good victim and find out where the money is in order to get their alleged victim what they deserve, and which of course will get them their 33 and a third percent. I'm not mad at it. Power to my fellow barrister. You do your thing. So stay tuned here, stay tuned to the case. I look forward to continuing to talk to you about it. For those who are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe, share this on all of your social media outlets. Help our channel grow, please, so that we can be everywhere like some of your faves, because I think we're great. And for those who are listening to the podcast, again, make sure you share it. Make sure you like and comment on those platforms where you can. Apple, please give us all the stars and all the comments and all of that, so we'll be a fast grower and get ranked over there as well. As always, if you are thinking about it, want to talk about it, chances are I'm thinking about it and want to talk about it too. So let's be honest together. Have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.